Hello everyone and welcome to race number 4 in the main competition of season 6. This time we're at Spa, and Spa is the longest track in the whole season. Generally Spa is a pretty fast track, it's got a lot of long sweeping high or medium speed corners, but it's also got THRS aka turn 1, which is a tight hairpin right, and it's also got the final chicane, which is also pretty tight. And of course it's also got the famous Camel Straight, where some of the cars we'll see today are gonna reach over 280 kilometers an hour. With that, let's talk a little bit more about the track and then we'll get into the actual competitors. So the main straight at Spa is actually fairly short. Once you cross the finish line, you reach about 190, 200 kilometers an hour depending on the car, sometimes a little bit faster than that. And then you got onto THRS, the hairpin T1, very tight. Then down the hill, as you speed up, approaching Eau Rouge and Radion. This is a famous corner complex that has been changed a couple of times over the years. You have a fast left-hander, very long, fast right-hander up the hill, and then another left-hander. And these cars like to go sideways there. You really gotta try and keep them steady and maintain as much speed as you can down the Camel Straight, which we're on right now. Easily over 250 in most cars before you need to brake for the first couple of S's. We have a right-hander, then a left-hander, then a short straight, and then another right-hander. And as you go through this one, then you have another straight over a crest down the hill into a tight right-hander. This one is deceptively tight and actually fairly long as well. And then you have a downhill left-hander before you get another short straight, and then you approach a double left-hander with a short straight in between. Now this first one, this one here, is a little bit slower than the second one, and so this really allows you to accelerate nicely out of that corner, assuming you can put the power down, then hard on the brakes for another set of S's. I was late on the brakes there, that's why I went sideways. And now after this left-hander you get two slow right-handers in a row, so number 1 through the checkpoint, and then number 2, although number 2 is a little bit faster than number 1. And once again it opens up a little bit towards the end, so you can really accelerate out for this fast part here. Then you have a fast left-hander that these cars cannot take flat out. And you also need to brake a little bit with these cars for this fast left-hander. Newer cars with downforce can go flat out there. And then after that straight, you have the final braking zone for the last chicane. And once you've made it through the final chicane, you get back to the main straight, and that's a lap around Spa. With that, let's get into the actual competitors. Our first head-to-head is the Coventry Climax versus the Dacia Amali, and the Dacia Amali is a little bit faster down the straights, and it is also a little bit better on the brakes. So while there's not much in it up until this point through the first hairpin, down the straight here the Dacia is going to establish a small lead. And this is going to be the interesting part here through the Eau Rouge and Radion. Both cars pretty sideways here, even the Dacia, which typically is fairly stable through the corners due to its soft suspension. But either way, it made it through these corners a little bit faster than the Coventry. And so now as they approach the first checkpoint, the Dacia is ahead, and it'll also be more stable and more planted overall here through these corners. The Coventry sideways there. And coming towards the tight right-hander. Again, the Dacia can brake harder, and so it can also brake later. No problem through that right-hander with either car. And the Dacia has a sizable lead at this point already. So through this double left-hander, again, no problems at all with the Dacia. The commentary was a little bit sideways for the first part. And then through these S's, very nice and stable for the Dacia. A little bit sketchy with the commentary. Again, pretty sideways. And the Dacia has a pretty big lead already, and as you can see, we're now in the fast part near the end of the lap. Once again, this left-hander is not flat with either car, nor is this one. A little bit wide on exit with both cars actually, so we're even there. Dacia can brake later for the final chicane, and so it's going to go through the final chicane first, and it's going to finish with a time of 2:48.9. Up next we have the Catan Corsa versus the Aero GPF4. Both of these cars are pretty good in the slower corners. The Catan is more powerful, so it accelerates faster, but the Aero has the higher top speed due to gearing. Both cars no problem whatsoever for the first hairpin, and they come down the hill towards Eau Rouge now. The Catan has a small lead, but the Catan is very unstable in high speeds, so taking that thing through the Eau Rouge here did take quite a few attempts. And the Aero is just faster through there, and because it's also got a higher top speed due to aerodynamics and gearing, it's gonna pull ahead on the straight here. As a result, it makes it to the SS first, and it's also more planted through the SS. The Catan, even though it looks nice and stable here in the video, it's constantly on edge. Like it's constantly wanting to oversteer. I don't know, it's just very, like, almost overly aggressive in terms of the front end bite. But nonetheless, it has caught up through these corners, as the Aero makes its way through these two left-handers here. The Catan is pretty much right with it. Hard on the brakes, both a little bit sideways. And as they approach the right-hander before the second checkpoint, they are virtually inseparable. And then through this part here, the Aero is just more stable. As you can already tell, the Catan was sliding around quite a bit there, and that is only going to continue because, as we know, the Catan is very unstable at high speeds, and this part is very fast. So as a result, the Aero gains a lot of time on the Catan here because it's just a lot more stable. And so it's going to reach the final chicane first, and as you would expect, it has absolutely no problems with the final chicane, and so it's going to clock in with a 2:48.2. Up next we have the Vento XF Caldera versus the Bluestreak F61. Now the Vento is slightly faster on the straights, I'd say. But the Bluestreak can brake later, and it's also better at handling. And so the Bluestreak gets a better line through the first hairpin, so it's got a small lead coming down the hill towards Eau Rouge. As we come to Eau Rouge itself, Blue Streak is quite sideways, losing a bit of speed, allowing the Vento to catch up. And so they both enter Camo Strait at pretty much the exact same time. And the Vento is ahead only slightly. But due to its braking and handling advantage, the Blue Streak is going to take the lead through these S's here. And then coming down the hill towards the tight right-hander, the Blue Streak once again can brake later, it turns harder, and so it's able to extend its lead. Now down the hill towards the double left-hander, once again both cars actually pretty good through these corners. Blue Streak is able to put the power down a little bit better, and it also can brake harder, so it brakes later for these S's here. Then to a little bit sideways. And so now through this right-hander before the second checkpoint, once again the Blue Streak very planted, very controlled. Very good second split time, by the way. And so now they come up to the last, like, really quick part of the circuit. Again, not flat in either car through here. A little bit wide with the Blue Streak, but I kept the speed up. And so the Blue Streak once again brakes harder, very good through the chicane, and so it's going to defeat the Vento this time, and it's going to clock in with a 2:45.4. Up next we have the Scarab versus the Minos. These two have been very close so far in the previous head-to-heads, but they have very different strengths and weaknesses. The Scarab can brake later and turn harder, so it's slightly ahead now after this first hairpin, but the Minos does have the advantage on the straights. So through Eau Rouge, the Minos surprisingly was probably the most stable out of all cars, I would say. And so it can match the Scarab's speed through there. And now they are on Camo Strait, where the Minos is just more powerful and faster. And while it does build up more speed on the straights, it also has to brake significantly earlier. And as you can see, that still wasn't quite the right. I would have had to brake even earlier. But nonetheless, this means that the Scarab easily catches up. So now through here, both cars pretty even so far. And then still neck and neck. Short straight. Minos once again has a power advantage. Or rather, there's only, I think, 2 horsepower in it, if I remember correctly. But yeah, better gearing and better aerodynamics means the Minos is quite substantially faster on the straights. But here once again the braking performance really hurts the Minos, and so the Scarab catches up. So for the second checkpoint, the Minos is only slightly ahead. As you would expect, the Minos is going to gain some time here, where you can really put the power down and go. And also through here, it's actually quite stable through this left-hander. so I was able to cut in pretty aggressively. But this is the big one. This braking zone here, the Minos really struggles, and as a result the Scarab catches up, pulls through, and the Scarab is actually going to finish first in 2:46.2. And for our final head-to-head, the HFF Cake versus the Sabre 11. Now the Sabre has won the first two races and the HFF has won the previous one. So there's only 1 point overall between these two. And they are very even up until this point after the first hairpin. The Sabre has a slight advantage, I would say, because it's got more torque, so it's able to accelerate just a little bit harder coming out of tight corners. But the HFF has just as much, if not even a little bit more top end power as the Sabre. And both cars are absolutely flying down the Camel Straight, both reaching well over 280 kilometers an hour, but the Sabre is slightly ahead at the first checkpoint. Through the SS, both cars are very nimble. I would say the HFF is a little bit better at putting the power down. And so now here for this tight right-hander, the Sabre actually has a little bit of understeer in this particular corner, not sure why, but nothing major, and here a little bit sideways with the Sabre, but again, not too much. But all of this has allowed the HFF to gain just a small lead because it hasn't had any understeer through the tight right-hander, and it was also more stable through that other left-hander. So as they come through these S's here, you can see once again both cars really good through these corners. HFF maybe a little bit more planted. And for this next checkpoint, I think the HFF had the fastest time out of all cars, and so it's slightly ahead of the Sabre. The Sabre was a little bit twitchy coming out of that tight right-hander, and so it lost a little bit of time versus the HFF there. And here as well, both cars pretty good, pretty planted through the fast left-hander, and both cars can brake quite late for the final chicane, but the HFF still has a small lead over the Sabre, and it's going to hold on to it until the finish line, and the HFF wins again with a 2:44.4. So the HFF takes another win after already being victorious at Sepang. If you noticed, the Sabre was actually slightly ahead by the first checkpoint, but then the HFF made up all of that ground and then some in the middle section by simply putting down the power better, allowing it to accelerate out of the corner sooner. This win also means that the HFF is now tied on points with the Sabre for the overall lead. So we'll see an epic showdown between these two next week in Monza. Make sure to tune in, and thanks for watching.